Alex, thank you.
Now, the Prime Minister has been told to toughen up by more than 60 of her own MPs. They have written to Theresa May with a list of suggestions on how she can better negotiate with the EU over Brexit.
Well, joining us now from Westminster, Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen, who is one of the MPs who signed that letter. Very good morning to you. Does it not make it harder for the Prime Minister when she's got a group of MPs from her own party who are dictating to her, threatening her perhaps even, over what she needs to say?
Not at all. What we've actually got is we're on the point of starting the next important phase of negotiations with the European Union. This letter, underlying what the Prime Minister's already said herself at the Lancaster House speech and the Florence speech about our red lines, this actually, not only is it people in the UK who'll read that letter, it's people in the EU. Mr Barnier will read that letter. It strengthens the Prime Minister's position going into the next important phase of negotiations.
Well, actually, it's not true that it's exactly what she said, is it? Because you make some different demands, particularly over the transition period. And they're demands which some would say would force UK businesses to sort of fall off a cliff edge in that period, which she is trying to soften.
Well, so far the European Union have laid out the timetable. For me, personally, I think it's very straightforward. We've got a very strong hand with regard to trade negotiations because the EU is the only part of the world that we have a trade deficit from, i.e. we buy more from them than we sell to them, to the tune of about 90 billion euros a year. So we are the customer, and that gives us a very strong position. And it's very straightforward. We're offering the European Union seamless, frictionless, free trade as we've got at the moment, and we just need to say to Mr Barnier, you know, what do you want to have tariffs on? We don't want tariffs on cars. Do you want tariffs on cars? We don't want tariffs on food. What do you want tariffs on? And if you really want, say, a trade deal, then it'll flush him out immediately. This letter, signed by 62 backbench Conservative MPs, also gone out to David Davis and to Liam Fox. And I think it's important that you look at the names on that list. They're not all people who campaigned to leave the European Union. John Penrose, who actually wrote the letter and got the signatures, he actually campaigned for Remain, but he appreciates that to deliver on the will of the British people, to leave the European properly, we need a proper deal.
I think it's interesting that you say it's all very simple, because I think the one thing everyone agrees on is these negotiations are proving not simple at all. And you say it strengthens a hand, but many people, including some Tory MPs, say that what it looks like is you're holding her hostage. And that is not a message we want to go out to the EU, is it? That she has so many difficult politics back home, she hasn't got a free hand. Doesn't make her look tough.
It strengthens the Prime and the government's negotiating position. They say also the letter went out to David Davis and to Liam Fox. All we're doing is really underlining that we're not going to be a rule taker. We're going to be a rule maker. To have control, we promised the electorate we'd have control of our laws, our borders, and our money, and we're laying out a strategy that will deliver that. If we're just going to merely be a vassal state of the European Union, we're not really leaving the European Union. And I think that will reflect very badly on the government, and at the next election it will reflect very badly on the Conservative Party.
These demands do diverge somewhat from what the Prime Minister has said publicly. If she doesn't follow your demands, you are quite a sizable group with some key names as part of them. I mean, Ian Duncan-Smith, there Priti Patel, former International Development Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who we know, is hugely influential. If she doesn't follow your demands, would you force a leadership election?
We're not anywhere near that. We haven't even started the negotiations yet. This letter strengthens the Prime Minister's hands, puts some steel in the government's position, and also...
Well, you say put some steel, but it could be interpreted as put some menace, actually, and I think that's an important question. What will you do if she doesn't listen?
It doesn't really matter what you think. It's actually what's most important is what Mr Barnier and the European Union think, and what they'll think is that you've got a large section of the backbench Conservative MPs, 20% of all our MPs, signing a letter. Bear in mind that ministers and members of the government generally don't sign letters, so there's a lot more support than that for a position. The European Union will be listening to and reading that letter and taking on board exactly what a large proportion of the Conservative Party, the party of government, and I believe the majority of people in the UK want. We want to take control. We want to take control of our money, our borders, and our laws.
Before we let you go, are you suggesting you're going over the head of the Prime Minister? She's the person who's doing these negotiations. You're saying this letter sends that message to the EU negotiators. Ignore what she says. Listen to what these 62 backbench MPs say.
We're only repeating to a great extent exactly what the Prime Minister's already laid out as the government's red line positions, taking control of our money, our borders and our laws. It formalises that, puts strength into the government position, and the European Union need to be listening. Transition is a difficult one. We didn't really get to grips with what transition would be, but what it can't be is just a continuation of being in the European Union and taking laws that we have no control over. Some of them, which we've already heard, could be very damaging. Laws being brought in about the City of London to give the European Council, the Commission, the ability to raise extra money from the City of London for regulation, and also the ability to, at the whim of the European Commission, to raid premises in London. I don't think that's taking control of our laws, our borders and our money.
Doesn't sound like it's giving Prime Minister control of the negotiations, but we must leave it there. Andrew Bridgen, thanks very much indeed.